the environmentalism, one reason that there isn't a lot of strategy at that level is because environmentalism brings forward more clearly than a lot of other movements the complete irredeemability of capitalism. Because, I mean, honestly, when I was in second grade, they put in a subdivision right next to where I lived, and it destroyed habitat for it was prairie before, and so all the meadowlarks disappeared, the garter snakes, grasshoppers, everybody, cottonwood trees, and that was. I knew when I was in second grade, when I was 7 years old, that you can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. I didn't use that language. The language I used was, if they keep building, they will eventually run out of places to build. And you don't have that concern if your primary issue is jobs. You don't have that because you can still somehow believe the trickle down theories, at least in somewhat. But if you're an environmentalist and you've got two neurons firing at the same time, you have to realize that capitalism's a pyramid scheme that can't go on forever. And so I think that's one reason that it's the line by Upton Sinclair. It's hard to make a man understand something when his job depends on not understanding it. And I could say the same thing. It's hard to make an activist understand something when the activism depends on you not understanding it. Because if they start questioning capitalism, then their tactics or strategy, then they would have to start developing effective strategy. Wait, I'm putting this backwards. If they don't question capitalism, they cannot come up with effective strategies because effective strategies would destroy capitalism.
We need an activism that will hit every level of this problem. So I'm not somebody who makes a distinction between, working within or outside the system, because I don't think there is such a thing as outside. There's not anywhere to go. I mean, it's all, no matter where you are and how far you withdraw, when global warming really starts to hit, you're going to be baked to soil with no bacteria too. Right. There's not going to be any amphibians where you live. The water's gone, or you're going to be underwater. Is one or the other. So there's nowhere to go that's outside. So I don't make those distinctions at all, and I think it's one very viable part of what we're going to have to do does include taking control of the democracy that we need and trying to make that work. It means we need a new constitution for sure, and this should not be frightening to people the way that it is. Lots and lots of countries have it written into their constitution, and every 100 years you're going to review this document. I mean, the Swiss have redone theirs 3 times. The Canadian redid theirs in, 1989 or something. They completely rewrote their constitution because the document's too old. It's not working anymore. We know a lot more about, what human rights are and what civil rights are. And we have a horrible document.
Not only that, but they don't even respect it.
No.
I've been brain spiraling into where we're actually free, and there isn't, like sidewalk else, but if you want to protest, you got to pay for it. You got to get it okayed by these 3 different people that your message is what they want to have out, and so really our Constitution doesn't even apply right now.
First Amendment.
It doesn't apply to private land.
There's not a single human right in the Constitution. There aren't even, the only civil rights we have are negative rights. So basically, when people think of the Constitution, they generally are thinking of the Bill of Rights, and that's true that does give you some protections against a large state body. But in terms of actually having positive freedoms, there's none in there. We don't have a right to health care. We don't have a right to education. Those will be positive freedoms. They have those in Europe and in other places. We don't have them here. It's not in the document. The document was really written for one purpose, and that was because the rising class of capitalists, the merchant barons, saw this vast continent, and they wanted to gut it and turn it into private wealth. They have been tremendously successful at that.
Oh yeah, they have.
I mean, that's what it was supposed to do. That's what it did. It's not broken, people. That's what it was written to do. Okay, and that's what it's done. We need a new document. So whether that happens on a local level, on a bioregional level, or on this sort of larger level of this crazy thing called the United States, it's going to have to happen. And the right wing have been very successful. They started in the 60s. They said, we're going to take control of this country. And everything from their child rearing practices on up to taking control of the school boards, they did it. And it took them a generation, but they've got wackos now in Congress. And they were really, really good at this. And the left refuses to think strategically, and I don't understand why.
Well, and you have a whole society of people that if you try to talk to them about how people deserve an education, you're a socialist, you're a commie, you're this, you're
Horror
that.
of horrors!
I think that someone who's dying should be able to see a doctor.
Yeah.
I can't wrap my head around letting him die. Like, that doesn't work for me.
Oh, and the number one reason people go bankrupt is medical costs.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. What is this?
That's his
That's
giant
my
debt.
dad.
No, it's my mom too. I know. It's
Loan
horrible.
debt.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
I heard, yeah, you know, we don't want to
Did
do
you want to say
anything.
something, Derek? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I think a couple things. One is that I think one of the first things against that we should do is we should stop calling it our Constitution because it's not ours, it's theirs. We need to recognize that it's not our government, it's theirs. It's like a doctor friend of mine says that the first step toward cure is proper diagnosis. And I think that one of the first parts of the diagnosis is to recognize that, and I don't want to get into the whole why can't you want, but I have a concern about the word occupy because the U.S. government is a government of occupation. And when you think of World War II, when you think of occupied France, it's not a good thing. And so, and especially a lot of indigenous peoples have expressed, I think, extremely justified concern over the use of the word occupy because this is an occupied continent. And what does a government of occupation do? It moves in, it extracts resources, facilitates resource extraction, maximizes production. That's what a government of occupation does. What does the U.S. government do? Moves in, facilitates resource extraction, maximizes production. So I think on every level we should really separate ourselves from that because it's not our government. It's like, you know, I got a call from a friend of mine several years ago saying, how much longer do you think we're going to be in Iraq? I was like, we're in Iraq? I thought we're Northern California. My friend's like, how much longer do you think our troops are going to be in Iraq? I was like, I got troops? Great. Will they do what I tell them? If I tell them to take out the Grand Coup, will they do it? It's like, it's a while college. I agree that I also don't believe in the reform versus revolution dichotomy because if we all wait for the great glorious revolution and don't do anything in the meantime, there's not going to be anything left. And if, on the other hand, all we do is reform work, this culture is going to continue to grind away. We need it all. And the next thing is I want to just validate what you're saying about the about working on local levels and how successful the right wing has been doing at that with getting people to take over. We're in Crescent City, and the board of supervisors here are like, if this is the left and this is the right, they're like right here, and so Walmart gets what they want. You know, they've been extremely effective at taking over. Next thing is, all that said, I think we need to recognize, you know, if I were in World War II, I would rather have been in occupied Denmark with a nicer government of occupation than in occupied Poland. But I think we need to recognize in both cases they're occupied, and so I think it would be great to have third, fourth, fifth, sixth parties. I think that's a great idea, but that doesn't alter the fact that if you're inside a prison, you can have whatever governing systems you want to make life better inside the prison, and I think that those are important things to do to make life better inside the prison, but we still need to recognize that we're in prison. And we could go the direction of civilization if you want, or in the short term, you know, no matter what form of government you have, as long as you have industrialism, you're going to have the concentration of power and wealth. Because resources have to go to those who go to the producers, and which means resources have to come from somewhere, which means you're going to have colonies, and then these producers are going to accumulate wealth. And it doesn't really matter whether those running the factories are, to use the communist phrase, horny-handed workers, or whether they are, you know, Bill Gates and Microsoft and BP. If you've got production, you still have accumulation of power. And once again, I'm all for mitigating. I think mitigation is a fine thing as long as we're honest that that's what we're doing.
All right.
Do you want? Should we? have a few minutes for them to ask a few questions.
Yeah, I got a couple already.
You never know what they're going to come up with.
Yeah. The first one is they're actually asking if you guys would be willing to come to Seattle to a public forum in like a hall or something.
You can write to Derrick and we will get back to you. And his website is derrickjensen.org.
Yeah. I've posted it a couple times
Okay,
before,
great.
but we'll make sure we get it out to him again, for sure.
Plus it's on the forums and it's on
Yeah.
yeah. I've been putting it everywhere.
How can we, are we too scattered to be a viable movement?
I'm afraid yes. And one of the reasons is that there's no demands. And without demands, you can't really come up with a plan. You know, you need to know sort of A to B, A to B, A to B, A to C, what you're after, how you're going to get there. And I think this has been a wonderfully creative phase, but ultimately some portion of this is going to have to make demands, and those are going to have to include taking apart the oil economy. They're going to have to include taking down capitalism, and ultimately underlying it is going to have to be a critique of civilization, because it's unsustainable. It's always based on drawdown, and we're going to have to get all of that right. Once those demands are in place, I think there are people all across the planet who are going to say hallelujah, because they're the ones whose land is being destroyed so that we can have our stupid little toys and our iPods and whatever. That's whose backs this is all being built on, and so on. So if there was a viable movement in this country that could make those kinds of gestures of solidarity and actually build that movement together, people all across the planet would be ready to join. They could really use some help from us. So the privilege and the power. So
I think that it might help if people are having a hard time. If that's not, I completely agree. And if that's not clear to people, perhaps it would help for them to look at this in terms of apartheid South Africa, that you have say that the ANC instead of actually demanding an end to apartheid, and at one point they wanted to end capitalism, instead they would have simply occupied spaces and said, when people said, "What do you want?" It's like, well, we're occupying Cape Town. Or think about this. I mean, would no demands have stopped Hitler? I mean, it's like, at some point. I mean, once again, this has been and continues to be really good for a rallying tool. And then at some point,
lay down the infrastructure basically. And,
and
you said
that's been fabulous. I'm not in any way criticizing it for that. It's tremendous. And I mean, we wouldn't be having this conversation if it weren't for that.
Yeah,
right.
And so that's. I mean, for crying out loud, I'm a writer. All I do is symbolic stuff. So I mean, I can't exactly attack symbol. You know, it's like I'll be hoisting my own petard. You know. So it's like. So I think it's great, but look at it in context of would 1847. John Brown decides to occupy.
Well, he did. He took the armory and he got killed.
No. He decides to just occupy.
Right.
He's not actually going to making demands. He's just going to occupy downtown Wichita. And then they say, "What do you want?" He didn't say an end to slavery. He doesn't say he doesn't want Kansas to become a slave state. He says. Then somebody parades an enslaved person by, and he goes. And a free black person walks by and he goes like this. I mean, it would work. I mean, at some point. Besides which, we shouldn't pretend that there aren't demands. I mean, there's obviously. I mean, you're doing this for some reason, right?
Oh yeah, many reasons. I mean, there's a whole list.
I've got demands.
Yes.
And there has been demands to an extent, like getting campaign reform, and there was some Depression era Glass-Steagall Act, getting that back in, and but the demands aren't exactly clear. They don't come across except for through our alternative media.
Also, I mean that's pull to the center again. Whereas, can't somebody just say we want to stop capitalism? I mean, it's like not enough to do these little reforms.
Yeah.
I mean, the one big demand that I heard out of the Occupy Wall Street Demand Committee, they may have changed, but I was hearing this report on the radio, and they said, well, the one thing we can all agree on is full employment. It's like